I think it's pretty safe to say that Marvel Studios is never officially going to get a sort of reboot and is just going to keep on existing with new iterations of what's come before. Now, when it comes to the future of Marvel Studios, there's plenty of films that have been announced, and of course there's the next 3 to 4 to infinite amount of decades that they haven't announced. Recently, the Russo brothers, who directed the last 2 Avengers films and some other Marvel Studios projects, have talked about the fact that they more than likely will be back in Marvel Studios somewhere down the road and that they're always talking to them. So let's get into it and let's look at all of the possible projects that these guys could come back for. So let's get the easiest thing out of the way, and that's the TV side of things with Disney Plus shows. Obviously, the Russo brothers, together or separated, could come back and direct an episode or 2 of any of the upcoming Marvel Studios TV shows, whether that was Moon Knight, She-Hulk, Hawkeye, Miss Marvel, whatever they have in development. These are obvious choices where you could bring them back. And obviously these guys started off on TV, Marvel Studios gave them their big break, so if they wanted to scale things back a bit and work an easier schedule, a Disney Plus show would definitely be in their wheelhouse. Now let's go over some of the other films that have been announced. Thor: Love and Thunder, that has a director. Doctor Strange has a director. Black Panther 2 has a director. Captain Marvel 2, same thing. So obviously everything that's been announced already has people attached to it, or we already know who's attached to it just because of the nature of the industry. Now, of course, there's plenty of other projects that also have been announced that we don't know who is attached to any of it. So for example, a 5th, 6th, 7th, 10th, 20th Avengers film, those films don't have directors attached to them. Now, it's easy to assume that Avengers is going to be the one they come back for. And obviously, after making Infinity War and Avengers Endgame back to back and pulling in more than $2 billion on each one, and the latter actually becoming the biggest film of all time, it's sort of like a obvious choice. These guys did good with The Winter Soldier. They did good with Civil War. People love everything they've done. So honestly, if you want the safe bet, if you want guaranteed money and guaranteed fan love, you bring them back for a 5th Avengers film, which brings me to the counter argument on that. If you're going in a brand new direction with the MCU, with these characters, with the Avengers, with Young Avengers, New Avengers, whatever you're going to be doing, it doesn't seem right to bring back the same guys who have honestly already put their massive stamp on the film industry and on the Avengers. So, don't get me wrong, I love what the Russo brothers did, but I also loved Joss Whedon's Avengers and Avengers Age of Ultron because there was clearly a different voice and a different style behind the camera. Again, I think you kind of need to have a shakeup like that going into a new age of MCU. So the Russo brothers, I think everybody would welcome them, but it feels almost so safe that you don't want that to happen. And honestly, I think that's just like my biggest takeaway. Yes, it's great. I think we'd all love it. I don't think many people would complain, but it feels too safe for everybody. So Avengers 5, we know is going to happen. We know that's a guaranteed, $1 billion, $2 billion franchise, but with so many things moving on behind the scenes, it seems a little too safe for everybody involved. So Avengers, I'd say likely, but probably not happening. Now, since the Russos began as comedy directors, how about Deadpool? How about you split them up? You get Joe Russo and maybe he does Deadpool and the other one, Anthony, does something else, or maybe vice versa. And honestly, I could see this being a thing. Marvel Studios is obviously not going to use all the elements of what Fox had, and if you wanted the Russos to integrate comedy and use elements of the Fox universe and bridge it over into the MCU, I don't see who you could get that's better than honestly one of them to sit down and really work with Ryan Reynolds and figure out where we take these characters, what we do with them, and how to mash up the styles. And I say that because they were able to do that with all the massive amounts of characters they had in the 2 Avengers films that they had to shoot back to back. So again, it's a pretty impressive resume, and Deadpool seems like a character that they want in there quicker compared to some of the other franchises that they have. So again, I think one of the two directing Deadpool 3 or Deadpool in the MCU or whatever it's called is a likely choice. Now, I don't know if they specifically want it, but I'm pretty sure if Disney and Marvel Studios were to announce one of them is doing the next Deadpool, it'd pretty much, take care of any negativity about what they do with Deadpool. If they were to say, well, the next Deadpool is happening, the Russo brothers are involved, but it's a reboot, I think people would complain a lot less knowing that the Russos are involved. And hey, speaking of reboots, let's talk about Blade. How about one of them for Blade? No, that's a terrible idea. Honestly, no. Look, I'll be real with you. Blade is my most anticipated Marvel Studios project outside of a particular one that includes a few fantastic characters. But Blade, I think, is out of their wheelhouse. And again, I could be wrong. We were all proven wrong when majority of people said that Captain America 2 was going to be god-awful because of them, but that didn't turn out to be true. So again, I think, one of them could do Blade, but it just doesn't seem like a Russo brothers property. And I think they're going to want to try to get somebody that understands that character a little bit more, that's maybe, having worked with Mahershala Ali a little closer, and that has sort of a different vision and a style. And I just don't think the Russo brothers fit the Blade mold. And I'm like 100% sure that they're going to go for a person of color to direct Blade, because that would make sense again. So yeah, the Russo brothers just not it. Just not even a good pick for Blade regardless. Now, yeah, let's talk about it. The obvious one. You know the one. One of them or both of them are coming back for this one. Wolverine. Wolverine is getting a MCU reboot. Billion-dollar franchise standalone. You make an event out of him teaming up with the X-Men the first time. Not a member of the X-Men that overshadows all of them, from the beginning. And then you focus on the other elements, like bringing together everything and having Wolverine right there as a big name. So again, the Russo brothers countless times have said Wolverine, they wanted to use Wolverine from the beginning. They couldn't work it out. They said they feel, it was unfortunate how long it took, because they would have used Wolverine the moment they acquired Fox, because they wanted him in Infinity War and Endgame. That didn't end up happening, obviously, because of the acquisition and how long it took. So it's one of these things where it just makes sense. The guys literally said they fell in love with Marvel and comic books because of Wolverine. They owned the first appearance issues and all that. One of them is coming back for Wolverine. Like, it just doesn't make sense that they're not going to get one of them or both of them to come back and maybe, I don't know, co-direct different Wolverine projects. Who knows how they're going to do it. But I think it's a given that that's what we're going to get. And honestly, it's the safest bet. Wolverine's going to need good directors. They're going to need to do it differently. He's going to need to put on a suit. And the Russo brothers have proven you can take any comic book suit, no matter how ridiculous in the comics, and if you give it to them and it's in their hands and directed, it makes sense and it looks good. So honestly, yeah, they're coming back for Wolverine, one or both of them. Now, how about Nova, the human rocket? The Russo brothers have talked about the fact that they love working with Captain Marvel and, that character's, the power levels and all that, but they will not be directing the upcoming Captain Marvel. If you need a franchise starter, that's a big one. If you need somebody that has been demanded by the hardcore fans for the better part of the last decade, Nova and the Russo brothers go hand in hand. It's completely out of the wheelhouse of what they've done with Captain America, and it puts them into a different section of the MCU. It's cosmic, it's grandiose, it's not, boots on the ground style, realistic quote-unquote story with a soldier. It's completely different. They can just be unhinged. They can tell a story in the MCU that's completely, separated from everything else that's in the MCU, and they'd be able to write pretty much everything from the ground up like James Gunn did with the Guardians, because let's be real, while there's comic people that are fans of Nova, the hardcore mainstream doesn't really know much, so it'd be like Ant-Man, Guardians, and all that. It's a free slate to do whatever you want and reinterpret the character any way you want. And speaking of doing what you want, how about doing the exact opposite? Doing what should be done, considering it's never been done in live action so far. Doctor Doom, the most famous comic book villain of all time, the archetype for the greatest villain of all time, many people will argue Darth Vader. Doctor Doom, he's the one. He's the blueprint. There's tragedy, there's emotion, superpowers, a tale that hasn't been told yet. And honestly, if Marvel Studios was to make a villain film, quote-unquote villain film, Doctor Doom is the obvious choice. His downfall and inevitable meeting with Reed Richards and how he becomes the maniacal ruler of Latveria that we know him as, it's honestly perfect. I think these guys could knock it out of the ballpark. One or both of them could really deliver something special. Doctor Doom is just a unique character that needs to be handled by a director that understands it. I think the Russo brothers are a perfect pick. Then we of course have the Fantastic Four, the franchise that within itself will also spawn multiple spin-offs and other franchises. Doctor Doom could spin off after it or be set before it. So again, Fantastic Four, pretty important. These guys carry with them probably the most baggage out of anything that's ever been adapted to film because they've been treated so wrong so many times, and specifically with the last live action iteration, which completely destroyed any semblance of, well, pretty much anything Fantastic Four. So honestly, everybody has an uphill battle. How do you make a crowd who absolutely hates every version of the Fantastic Four that we've gotten in live action so far, except that the Fantastic Four are coming and are a big deal? You give it to the Russo brothers. The guys would do tremendously well with it. Now, I also feel that this is a little too safe because you kind of know what to expect, and it feels like it would just be the Avengers banter that they have in their Avengers film, but between the four core members. And yes, that is the Fantastic Four at their core, but honestly, I think it'd be a little too similar, but they are the obvious choice. One or both of them coming back to do Fantastic Four is honestly one of the best choices you can make. Automatically, people would not dismiss it. People would be more excited than ever before. So the Fantastic Four would obviously be a great choice, but I feel like that they already have a director and main stars in mind. And last up, we got the X-Men. They're coming to the MCU, and like Wolverine before them, they're gonna be completely different, as that's been stated by Kevin Feige and Bob Iger. So what we can expect, I don't know, but the Russo brothers split them up. Give one of them Wolverine, give the other one the X-Men, and maybe swap them around. Have them, take on the other one's project for the sequel. Honestly, I think you could do great by setting one of the Russo brothers on the X-Men and seeing what they can deliver since they're such huge fans of the characters. And again, it's a team-based thing, so if you were to bring back both of them and set them on X-Men together, they could pave the way for an entire X-Men-based universe that spins out of it. And again, we know we're kind of going to get this. The X-Men have the X-Men. They have X-Force. There's so many different branches of the X-Men that there's no way that these characters are not spinning out into sub-factions of TV series, of another spin-off film, and so forth. And obviously tying it in with Deadpool and all that, it's going to be like the comics, where the X-Men are essentially a universe within Marvel that can exist on its own because it's so grandiose. And that's really why I think if you were to give them the X-Men, you're pretty much guaranteeing a successful, infinite amount of content with this brand. So the Russo brothers, out of all the ones I've listed, I think X-Men, Wolverine, and possibly Nova would be the best picks.